It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Kate, this is our May programme. We're almost in the summer. It's very exciting, isn't it? And we've got a really interesting programme. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about it. Well, who's on? What's happening?
Well, we've got some great interviews this month. So Sam Taylor joins us, so long-time learning practitioner and leader, very, very passionate about the skills conundrum that we find ourselves facing. Martin Cousins joins us to talk about some new research, and Egle Vinishgata joins us to talk about her really excellent research into AI, so the topic of the moment. And plus we have Natasha Patel from Warwick University Students' Union in our regular series with the Charity Learning Consortium. And Rob Clark returns with some insights on learning news with an analysis of the market from Fosway's Miles Runham and the ever wonderful Julie Dryburgh.
The ever wonderful Julie Dryburgh. That's true. Julie Dryburgh and her dogs, you have to say, at the moment.
She's
so
unfamiliar
please.
that she's an expert on organisational culture.
She is absolutely, as well as dogs. So it's going to be a great programme. Enjoy the show.
Our next interviewee has been a few months in the making. I've been stalking her for a while, and I'm thrilled to welcome her to Learning Now Television. Egle Vinishgata is director at Nodes Learning Innovation Studio. She's going to tell us a little bit about her work and some really, really important research that she's been doing around AI. So welcome, Egle.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Kate, for having me.
So tell us a bit about Nodes and what you do day to day, because it sounds, Learning Innovation Studio sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it kind of is. I'm a learning technology strategist at the core, and obviously I'm involved in various, but on the AI side specifically, I help L&D integrate AI into their operations, and I help create AI upskilling strategies to support the organization-wide adoption of AI, because L&D has this dual role. And as part of my work, Donald Taylor and I, we teamed up as on a separate piece of research, now a second edition of it, where we are tracking and surveying and interviewing people in the industry to understand what's happening with AI actually on the ground, how it's actually being used beyond the hype, beyond the potential, essentially.
And it's so important. I mean, having just come off the back of the Learning Technologies event where, everyone is talking about AI in some way, shape or form, it is difficult to, as you say, get through the hype. I mean, I'm looking at this, literally my job to look at this stuff all day, every day. And I'm, struggling to unpick in some cases, what's real or what's meaningful or what's transformational. In amongst all of this noise. So what's the research found?
Well, quite unsurprisingly, using AI for learning content creation dominates. L&D absolutely dominates. But it's also, as I said, it's not surprising. And that's because content creation, content generation is generative AI's natural use case. Yeah. But I just wish the gap wasn't so wide between simple course content creation and arguably more powerful uses of the same technology, such as skills practice or performance support. And when we looked into more advanced use cases, there's another thing that we noticed, and that is that those L&D teams that are ahead of the pack with AI, that are experimenting with it beyond content, and what they're doing is that they're collaborating closely and deliberately with other teams across the business most often to gain access to their know-how and their skills. So they're approaching AI and L&D in a way that goes beyond L&D.
That's really exciting to hear. I mean, and I guess because you think about it, I sort of was looking at it a little while ago and thinking about it almost in terms of a maturity model. And I think you've really nailed it, because you kind of go from simple to sophisticated. Is that right?
Yeah, there's the AI complexity scale, and what it shows that on the left hand you have simple uses of AI, mostly administrative tasks and learning design, content creation, and then you go towards the right, and on the far right, and you have sophisticated uses, which is skills technology, skills intelligence, personalization, performance support, these sorts of uses. And what happens is that the more towards the right you go, the more additional skills, technology, and relationships you need to make that happen.
Great. I love that. I think that's such a useful barometer for us to think about it as well. And so for me, as again, I say I have to, it's my job to look at this stuff, but there seems to be a real lack of distinction between, and forgive me for using layman's terms, but around old AI, i.e. stuff that was around before generative AI, and what is truly generative AI. Do you think that's, do you think that's a problem? There seems to be a lot of smoke and mirrors around it all.
I mean, it is important to know that there is a difference between this old school discriminative AI and generative AI, which is this new kid on the block, and that overall AI isn't a novelty in L&D. And as you're saying, it's been around for now. We've been doing personalization to some degree, content curation, matching, and so on for a while now. But personally, I think what's more frustrating, and I think many people who have been to the recent Learning Technologies exhibition would echo that, is that seemingly every edtech or learning tech product is now proclaiming to use AI in some way, either AI, discriminative, generative, or just AI. And the way a lot of them are doing it, they're talking about the AI tool first, rather than about how they solve a meaningful problem with it. And that's not to say that they're doing bad work. It's more of a testament of the level of AI education in the market among buyers, that just saying that you're using AI in any way without specifying, without talking about the problem, that it actually attracts attention.
I love that. And, it's that whole thing of finding a solution for a problem you don't necessarily have. But one of the things I really love about the report is that you are talking through real use cases and real applications of AI in L&D. So what are some of the most compelling use cases that you're seeing?
So the first one that comes to mind is skills practice bots. So if you think about difficult conversation simulator, feedback giving simulator, in some cases coaching, which is a bit of a different kind of use case, but still it is a skills practice bot. And there are lots of them in the market right now. Some of them are custom, created internally within companies. Some of them are off the shelf from vendors. But what I find so exciting about them is that conceptually, they really have the potential, a lot of heavy lifting off of content, and do it better. So instead of telling people how to do a thing, you can show them and let them practice that thing. So it is a different, it's a new and different tool in our arsenal in L&D to achieve our more strategic goals, instead of focusing on the content output. And if we think about some solutions that are right now in the piloting stage, they haven't been, to my knowledge, deployed wholesale and thoroughly tested. But one thing that I'm finding that's popping up, especially among larger organizations, is performance support bots used for new hire onboarding as their initial use case. And what they're doing is that they're cutting a lot of content that historically has been fronted in your onboarding and not retained anyway. So if you think about it, if you're joining a new company, there are pages upon pages of compliance content to go through, especially if you are working in a highly regulated company. And it is impossible to remember all of that. And it's unrealistic to expect that people are going to be able to absorb that in a few days and remember how to use a certain procedure and what procedure applies in some situation further down the line. So what these performance support bots are doing. They're serving that content when people actually need to use it in their workflow after the initial onboarding. But again, this kind of use case is still at the piloting stage. But thinking even more broadly about the same technology, we can think about them as knowledge companions, and they can help make the company's knowledge base usable. At least that's the hope. And I think that's just merging learning and knowledge management. That's a very strong and compelling use case, I would think. And
You're talking my language there. I'm seeing that conversation happen a lot, but we're not necessarily distinguishing. We sort of lump everything in with learning. But to your point, performance support, practice, mastery, knowledge management, these all sort of fall under that umbrella. And we're a bit guilty, I think, collectively of not distinguishing what we're trying to do under that learning umbrella. So, I could give you a round of applause for that. It's so important to think about those distinctions to me.
Yeah, and I think that brings us back to the point of starting with a problem rather than with this blob of learning, or with the AI tool that we need to use AI. What do we do with it? And if you start with a problem, that kind of falls into place naturally. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to support people who already who need to perform in their jobs? Do you need to reskill them because the company needs to do a different thing with them? It just kind of follow the process.
Yeah, I think you can copyright that, by the way, the blob of learning. I think that needs to be copyrighted. That is fantastic. That's such a great description. I mean it. We're all guilty of it. We all do it.
Just have to be honest about it. Yeah. And thinking about the use cases, one final use case that I wanted to call out, and this one of the ones that came up in our research, is that you can use AI to analyze recorded people's calls, to understand how the way they speak and approach situations is changing following something quite ambiguous as coaching. Which is a problem that we have long tried to solve. We know that this is a powerful tool in our arsenal, coaching or any kind of intervention in general, but we don't quite know how that changes even after an event, how the way people behave, how they talk changes after we give them some sort of learning training, whatnot.
So with your with the kind of the body of work that you're building, and it's really exciting. I'm always, data trumps feelings. And so to have the data as a jumping off point is so valuable for everybody. What would be some of your tips for people that are just exploring AI and how they can start to apply it, or thinking of some of those challenges, maybe that it's flipping that question on its head a little bit?
Yeah, so the first one is something that we mentioned earlier, which is start with a business goal that AI can help achieve, not an AI tool that you're looking to use somewhere. Because you'll likely need resources, and for that you'll need to build a business case. And all the business cases that I've heard in my conversations with learning leaders, they all started with, okay, so what are we trying to do here? How are we gonna help business achieve what the business wants to achieve, rather than how do we use just this tool for LMD and play around with it. So that's a first. The second one is be creative with what you have, because you might not find an AI tool tailor-made for you. And actually, quite likely, you're not going to find that. But you can bend the tools that you already have, or you can have easy access to, and make them work for you. So it's ultimately like one of the contributors to the research, the way he put it is that it's not a cost challenge, it's not a budget challenge, it's a creativity challenge. And finally, I would say tap into the skills and technology that you have elsewhere in the organization. Create and foster these relationships. Because if you're looking to use AI in increasingly sophisticated and strategic ways, you cannot do that within L&D alone. You need to go outside.
Eglert, thank you so much. I could talk to you about this all day. We'd love to have you back on as your body of research evolves. I know you're part of this very exciting collective with people like John Fletcher and Ashwin Mehta and Don and some other people. So we would love to sort of follow your journey through and bring some of that research and some of that findings to the LNTV audience. Hopefully, Colin will flash up on the bottom of the screen where you can get the research. So AI and L&D, the state of play, you can get it from Don Taylor's website, and we'll pop up some contact details for Eglert as well. I mean, just absolutely fantastic work, and thank you so much. And the fact that this is freely available to people is just an absolute gift. So please don't waste it if you're watching this. And Eglert, thank you so much for your fantastic work and for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Come back anytime.
Are you productive or are you just busy? At Happy, we run a productivity blitz course. It runs for a whole week, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, with 10 top tips. Those who came on the course found they gained 38 minutes in productivity each day. So let us help you be more productive.
Rob Clark returns again with some insights from Learning News, and this month he's talking to Fosway's Miles Runham on the digital learning side of the market, and also speaks to Julie Dryborough on organisational culture.
Coming to learn all about the new technologies out there in the future of work, particularly through the lens of AI.
We just love to meet the new people, see what the new trends are.
It gives me a good chance to really immerse myself in the industry and find out what's going on.
We're at Learning Technologies 2024.
The primary challenge in the L&D space remains leveraging AI and data to enhance learning.
I don't think anyone's job is a threat here. The amount of learning in organisations will grow hugely as a result of AI, and therefore the opportunities will grow as well.
What are the problems that people are facing, and how do we utilise AI to solve those problems?
How can we use AI to actually allow not just to do what talent development can do already, but do it faster, better, cheaper, at more scale? How can we use it to do stuff that talent development just can't do at the moment?
So yes, there's efficiencies there, but also how can we use AI to help organisations with their data strategy, with their learning strategy?
Changing not only how we do the work that we do, but also the kinds of experiences that we're delivering to our learners.
We will use AI to help our customers map skills with jobs and content.
So I think we'll continue to see some challenges surrounding the ethical use and application of AI.
AI will take away a lot of the operational stuff that we do, and it will free us up to do what we do best, and that's focus on people.
Using technology, you can do far more with less budget, with less resources.
Allow people to find what they need, when they need it, the ability to find just what I need, and for the platform to become an everyday learning tool.
We supported one client, for example, to deliver 2.8 million hours of training just in 1 year. That's where we fit in the market, really. How do we solve those really big challenges for those really big businesses?
Linking learning and development activity to business.
Connecting learning to business incomes, really trying to be that strategic partner.
The macro market perspective is one of budgets, one of doing more for less. We're seeing this a lot.
Access to the right content based on who they are, what they want to be training on.
Making sure you reach the learner as they learn.
Technology is too visible, and we concentrate more on the technology than we do on the learning. Try and imagine it's not there, and it's a window that you see through into helping you to learn and enhance that learning.
The most fundamental issue is the economics. The economy has been a challenging one. On the budget holder side, there's pressure on investment, making the case for investment, proving impact, etc. And then on the vendor side, it's making it harder. Sales cycles are slower, budgets are lower, been a tougher market. One of the things perhaps behind that is then there's a bit more of concentration on, so what's the value from investment? What are we doing these learning initiatives for? How can we demonstrate that that's working? How can we improve it if it's not working so well? Which brings the industry towards more use of evidence. There's always an interesting debate perhaps under the surface of the event of, between what sells and what works. And I think this sort of the requirement for evidence is having to bring vendors closer to demonstrating what works. It's not that they've not been able to do that before, it's perhaps just as the burden of proof rests a bit heavier this year. So that's bringing out things like data analytics to the fore, so there's services and releases that are being perhaps emphasized there. And I think on a market that's often focused very squarely on content, I think there's a bit more emphasis on service now. So what's around that content? What's the content for? Can you demonstrate and articulate the problem that the content's going to solve? What's a deeper experience and a broader experience than content alone? And I think the best vendors are sort of sharpening their design sensibilities and service-led approaches there. And I think that's sort of setting perhaps a bit of a new agenda. So I think we're seeing AI show itself in a number of different ways, and sometimes perhaps not show itself. So I think there's a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, a lot of conversation. And perhaps on the corporate side, on the buyer side, there's a sense of trying to understand what are the problems that AI can solve for us. There's a lot of focus early on efficiency, savings in things like translation, content creation, curation, recommendation. That's tending to automate things that are being done already. So that efficiency drive is going to continue, and I think that's going to be an interesting economic factor in the market. So back to some of those economic factors where there's a lot of savings that could be made from that automation. How will that play out into buyer expectations, potentially into pricing, etc. So I think there's on the horizon some of that pressure. Against that, there's a real sense of sort of solution potential, things like personalization and adaptive learning experiences, deeper, richer analytics to really understand learner behavior, maybe prescribe and recommend in a different way than we've been able to as well. So I think there's some interesting dynamics at play, but we're still in quite early days as well. So I think there's a lot to see developing from here.
Julie has just chaired a session on the power of conversations. Julie, an intriguing topic. Tell me all about it.
Creating conversation spaces in organisations and why that is so important. And for me, being at Learning Tech, there's something about the technology has to land in a culture, in an organisation. And if you don't have a culture or an organisation where people can talk, where they can challenge, where they can resolve conflict, where they can raise issues, that technology comes into a space which might not work as well. It's all about being human. It was about setting up brave spaces so that people felt like they could talk, and inclusive spaces. I love the fact that there was like humanity right in the middle of Learning Tech.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
In the post-Learning Technologies Conference euphoria, I'm lucky enough to get a chance to talk to a good friend, Sam Taylor. Sam Taylor has been a long time in learning, and what we want to talk about is how her career reflects some of the changes, the vicissitudes of the industry, and how those changes were reflected in the conference that she and I were both at recently. So first of all, welcome, Sam Taylor. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you today. And tell us just a quick background of how you got to where you are today. how you climb that mountain?
Well, I
Step
suppose
by
it's a
step.
story of being endlessly curious. So after university, I did a couple of basic admin jobs, got really bored, taught myself web design and internet marketing, and this was at the beginning of sort of the original internet sort of boom. Then I ended up working for an online executive education company, one of the first ones that sort of existed. And whilst I was there, I was sort of lucky enough to get into a bit of project management and sort of mix with loads of instructional designers. And then I started doing a bit of flash design. And so that began to spark my interest and curiosity in learning. And I suppose ultimately, how can we help people do their jobs better without necessarily always being there in the same room as them? So my initial sort of journey was around how can we encourage people to use digital learning, e-learning more? And I actually spent about 3 years in a sixth form college helping lecturers embrace digital technology as well. Ended up inside of one of several very large organizations that I've sort of been lucky to work for over my career. And that got me back into sort of the e-learning world, looking at how you could support a different way of helping people develop themselves, particularly in contact centers. That led to me getting a job centrally within the organization. About that time, I got involved with what was the e-learning network, which is now the Learning Network. And that was where I first heard Charles Jennings speak about 70-20-10. So that was my legacy to that business. It was like, right, there's got to be a better way we can do learning. Left there through one of 6 redundancies of my career and ended up working for Tesco, which was a very huge beast, but actually not really using digital learning a lot. So there was an opportunity to transform that learning culture, not necessarily just towards digital, but thinking about a greater blend of how people could access learning content and develop themselves inside the organization. Done a similar kind of thing, transforming learning cultures then inside of a couple of other organizations, really reflecting different sectors. So financial services, obviously there was the likes of Tesco with a huge retail and customer service population. And then I ended up working for a train manufacturer, which again is potentially quite a different skill set, but a lot of the core needs were the same. And the access to technology and to content and to learning was potentially quite different in those environments. It wasn't the luxury of being sat at a desk all day, every day. And then most recently, I've sort of been even more curious still and started doing a lot more stuff around OD, talent, and performance, thinking about how we can bring skills into sort of a holistic picture for the organisation, ultimately to lead towards building organisational learning and learning organisations.
So what you've done, what you're saying to me, from maybe my naive perspective, is that you've not gone the orthodox course of I used to do face-to-face training in a room, and then I suddenly was doing 100% e-learning, and then I moved a little bit to blended. What you're saying is that as you followed the ways of corporate learning, what seems to me is you actually managed to make it more and more complex and more interesting and less narrow. You know, that one of my bugbears is that in many organizations over the last 15 years, it's got narrower. So there's, you know, it's a one-stop shop, one-pop shop on your laptop, just do that stuff, that's you sorted. Whereas what you seem to be saying to me is that it's actually the tools have allowed you to do more and to offer a bigger variety of opportunities to people in organizations.
We know that the click next to continue hideous e-learning that just exploded when LMSs started becoming commonplace currency doesn't work. So actually, the time I was involved with the e-learning network was when Clive Shepherd was in charge of it. And so, yeah, so that became my world. And I learned so much from that community and from that set of peers that really shaped the way I thought about development inside of organizations, and just sort of wanting to rip up the rule books and say, I remember once there was a huge sort of bit of concern inside of the learning department because they discovered that somewhere in the business, a part of the business was having lunch and learn sessions, but learning hadn't been involved in any of them. And we're like, we need to go in and make sure they're doing everything correct. And it was like, I was just like, yeah, if it works, let them get on with it. They're having fun.
Yes, that kind of hanging on to learning as if it's ours and it all comes through us is a nonsense. It's just it's a failure to understand basic human principles, which is we're learning animals. We learn in all sorts of ways all the time, and you can't mandate that or control that. So let's short circuit to the Learning Technologies Conference. You went around, you were at the conference. I know you were at my session, for which I thank you very much for coming along, but you went to the exhibition as well. How did the sort of stuff manifesting there reflect those changes that you experienced in your career? On how much do you think there was a bit of a contradiction here?
It's an odd one because I think for those who have never been to Learning Technologies before, it is sheer overwhelm. And this year just felt really overwhelming when you walked into that hall with just the size, the scale, the noise. But actually, the voices didn't seem to be that distinct. Obviously, there's the standing joke that you can walk around with your bingo card, and we all know that everybody was doing that. How many times can you spot AI? And even if it isn't really AI, it's just something they've always had there and just stuck the label on because it'll make it sell more things. So I think, having been to Learning Tech for, I think I probably first went around 2004. So 20 years of going to Learning Tech, which scares me a bit. I think on the conference level, I was finding less, on the exhibition level rather, I was finding less value. So I think that for me was a bit of a disappointment. I think for a lot of people, Learning Technologies has very little to do with the stand and everything to do with seeing the people that you've worked with, meeting your peer learning community or personal learning networks, catching up with people and just discussing what things people have been up to in their worlds, because I think that's where the value happens. It's that bringing them people together and that connection than necessarily lots of the things that are going on around you in the big sort of flashy stands.
I think that's a really good point, and I find it completely impossible to walk through Learning Technologies without being accosted, and in many ways that's the point. You meet people you haven't seen for a while. You get to find out what people are interested in and what they're not interested in, what they're doing and what's new, and that is a really interesting learning moment, I think. My perception, and you could disagree with me, a slight mismatch between the totality of products and the reality of life, corporate life and corporate learning. Is that
it
fair?
Feels like it's almost reinforcing things that we know don't work. So if we are thinking about how can we truly support organizations and people inside of organizations grow and develop themselves, chances are it's not through a content catalog or through a learning platform. Actually, we know that there is more to learning than just the traditional 10%, if we're going to take the 70-20-10 model sort of into consideration. But yet it still feels like that focus is largely on that 10%, and it's still about, and when you start looking at some of the AI stuff, it definitely was about how can we here's tools to create learning more quickly. It's like, we know the one thing our organizations don't need is more content.
100% agree. And I also, we've got a once in a generation chance for L&D to show itself to be utterly invaluable, to prepare the whole organization for this wave of change and innovation. And then I hear people say, oh, we can develop materials 10% faster or 20% faster. And you weep, because that's not the point. And no one will thank you for that. People will thank you when you get behind the whole organization.
When I think about it, it's almost L&D has to get out of its L&D world, which is often easier said than done, depending on how they're viewed inside the business and how easy it is to get your voice heard in that business. But it's even moving L&D into broader people teams, HR, whatever you want to call it, because really, particularly when you start talking about skills enabled organizations, it's never going to work, one, if learning runs it, and two, if you haven't baked it into performance, into talent acquisition, because it needs to be everywhere, and ultimately it needs to be owned by the business. So it's about getting outside of our world. It still feels like here's L&D, and by the time L&D gets involved, we're still just taking orders, turning out a course, and then not really being able to prove that it's made a difference on anyone, because it possibly hasn't.
So Sam Taylor, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your insights, your ideas, and for sharing the best part of your career with us. I think it's really very, very interesting, and good luck going forward.
Hopefully so. Thank you for inviting me on.
At TechWolf, we realised that HR didn't need another HR application. They needed relevant skill data. Our skill data infrastructure works in the background to not only connect HR data, but business systems where employees actually do their work and skills are demonstrated. Our advanced AI structures skill data into a tailored skill framework in the form of a taxonomy and mapping of your jobs to skills. TechWolf creates relevant, granular skill profiles for every employee. Our API then automatically gets that skill data into the systems where it can be used by the business. We also take privacy very seriously, and TechWolf is trusted by global companies.
Recently at the Charity Learning Consortium conference, I had the joy of meeting our award winners, and I'm really pleased to introduce Natasha from Warwick Student Union today as we talk about her both award win, but why she won her award. It is really of interest to the Learning Now TV audience what amazing things can happen with third sector organisations and how they can do so much with so little. And what I love about Natasha's story that we're about to hear is that it really is focused on doing the right thing. So what can we learn? Natasha, welcome to Learning Now TV. Who are you? What have you done? Share your story with us if you don't mind.
No problem. So my name's Natasha Patel, and I guess once upon a time I was a occupational psychologist. So my kind of background is in psychology, but during the last 2 years, I've been working first time in the charity sector. And you're definitely right in terms of the limited resources, shall I say, and really brings out creativity, I think, as an L&D professional. And that's really what this 2 years has been about in terms of my journey and collectively where I work, which is Warwick Students Union, our journey as an organisation through, EDI and what we now call inclusion and belonging.
Help us to understand that shift. Most people will know EDI as a phrase, of course, equity or equality, diversity and inclusion, but you're calling it something different. Why the shift?
The shift really kind of came organically. So first, when I came into the organisation, I came in as a L&D advisor, and whilst kind of one of the first things I wanted to do was really kind of get a sense check, kind of a pulse survey almost at that time, what was happening within not only the L&D space, but also within the EDI space. So I completed a training needs analysis at that point. And what really kind of came out of this was the fact that across kind of senior management, so that included our directors, our CEO and our full-time officers at the time, was that there is a great appetite for EDI and an understanding of what that looks like. However, people do not know what to do with it. It's such a big topic. It's quite overbearing. And especially in terms of senior leadership, they didn't feel that they had the answers, to this. And in addition to that, I think the biggest thing that really kind of came out of that was the fact that there was a lack of psychological safety across the organisation. And again, not just within kind of this organization, but in previous lives when I've worked, within the banking and the IT sector, it tends to happen. It's there. It's something that's not necessarily spoken about. So it was that lack of feeling that people could talk about EDI related matters. When I joined the organization, it was just on the back of kind of the Black Lives Matter movement. So it was something that felt it should be mainstream, felt that we should be doing something about it, and almost, dare I say, at times tokenistic too. It felt like we need to be on this bandwagon. And my approach was very much, yes, we do. However, it's not a tick box exercise. It's something that I think should be woven into learning and development across the organisation.
So you've got there this whole kind of fear, if you like, that people have, senior managers in particular, have got the sense that they want to talk about EDI. They want to talk, I'm going to use your language, inclusion and belonging. I think it's a nice reframe. They want to talk about inclusion and belonging, but just don't know how to go about it. Now, I know that you created an environment where the student union could be dedicated to inclusion and belonging. And I just wonder how did you create that environment? How did you get that sort of that buy-in? How did you comfort the fear that people have about talking about what we should be able to talk about in a very open way?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for me was to take small steps. You will not get it right first time round, second time round. And I think what I did is, on the back of the training need analysis, was sit down with each of the directors and kind of probe a little bit more, really seek to understand. And I think that's when you can utilize those kind of soft skills that we talk about all the time. It's best practice, active listening, compassion, empathy is huge when we're talking about EDI or on IMB. And what really came from those conversations is initially, we had kind of senior directors coming into the room, very apprehensive. What's she going to ask me? How's she going to ask it? And having honest, candid conversations where we created that safe space to be able to get things wrong, to be able to say it as people wanted to, because that's a big fear. And almost that fear compelled people to therefore not do anything or take any action, which is what was kind of, then coming out, in bucket loads, to be honest.
So it can be paralyzing, can't it? It can be, I'd rather say nothing than get it wrong. But what you're talking there about is creating that safe space, allowing people to say it wrong, and then learn a new way to say the right thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And even for myself, what kind of organically then happened is it developed from kind of learning and development into inclusion. When we're talking about EDI, so what we had a previous EDI committee. We dissolved that previous one and we set up a new one because we wanted wider representation across the organisation. But I think more importantly, it was my job to really send the message that we're going to do something about it now. I think speaking with other organisations, including the university, a lot of the time we get so bogged down with the details and every step needs to be calculated and we need to know what we're doing. Sometimes we just need to crack on. We just need to give us the opportunity to get it wrong. Not on a wide scale, absolutely not, because there's implications, but within a committee. So that's where we kind of went down the EDI committee. And we were having conversations again in that safe space that what would a kind of inclusive organisation look like? And that's when, we did a series of workshops with the committee members. And what really came from that is that we should have these type of behaviours. We should be able to have those conversations. We need to not be judgmental. We need to be able to ask the questions. We need to be able to fuel our own learning. And what happened organically is we actually put together what we called our inclusion and belonging principles, because as an organisation we're striving to becoming, and this is kind of our mission, to become instinctively inclusive. Now, appreciate that we're not there and it is a journey, but what can we do to get ourselves there? And that's when we kind of started moving into, it's almost like a planned action plan, where we're in that space where, we recognise our biases. To say we don't have any is not true. I think we can all say, we do have it. However, what do we do about them? How do we bring them to the surface? How do we allow each other to openly talk about this within kind of team spaces? So the little steps that we started doing is initiating team meetings and have EDI on the agenda. So, go and read the Equality Act, come back and just have that conversation amongst your team. What did you learn? What was new? Did you know, there's other protected characteristics outside of race or sexual orientation? Are we talking about disability in the same way, or the same vein that we talk about race? These are all kind of really fruitful conversations. And what started happening is people felt safe to be able to have those conversations, because to a large degree within teams you do have psychological safety. So it was those small steps with kind of almost pressure coming from the IMB committee, and then having separate training sessions with each of our directors and collectively as an organisation, that we really saw this shift almost in the mindset of, right, we're in this place now where we're going to do something about it. That's great. And I've got the support to be able to work our way through it.
Amazing tips that you've given us here today. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I love the fact that you're getting to instinctive inclusion. So it's just part of the everyday and the everyday thinking. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Natasha. If you want to hear more about Natasha and the award win, then do head over to the Charity Learning Consortium's website for more information, or get in touch with Natasha, because you've got so much to say about this. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I apologise to LNTV listeners, watchers and enthusiasts, because there's been a bit of a gap between the last Martin Cousins research report and today. But we've got a real treat for you. This report is called, by Deloitte, is called Now Decides Next: Insights from the Leading Edge of Generative AI Adoption. And it is dated January 24, and there'll be a crawl on the screen so you can download it and read it at your leisure. Martin, why did you pick this, and what's important about it? Obviously it's AI, but why this one?
After my mini break from doing these slots, I've returned with the only topic that we could be discussing. Of course, I can't help but feel that we are looking at a report that is very much a sort of here and now report. And we'll look back on this in a couple of years' time and say, well, that really just reflected the moment in the way that research reports do. But I've chosen this because it's some research of nearly 3,000 business and technology leaders in organizations that are using and trying out generative AI. So basically, it's a reflection of people who are in organizations where something is happening. So, and it's like, so what do we learn from that fact? And I think there are some things in here which, one might say might not be too unsurprising, but I think there is one thing that's a big red flag for our audience, our viewers, and that's around HR. But what I would say is, if we go through it, I'll give you a few highlights. I quite like the question. There was what's your emotional response to generative AI? And I thought that was, I quite like that, because
yes.
That's a very here and now, visceral type of question. And, 62%.
And 62% said excitement.
So there's a lot of excitement, followed by fascination, followed by uncertainty. And then you get down to the 10%. That's
30%. 30%.
Yeah, well, also 10% feel anxious. And that's 10%. Yeah, of nearly 3,000 business and technology leaders. Actually, suddenly that's kind of that becomes quite a lot of people. And then there's confusion, 8%, and fear, 6%. So at the bottom end of the emotional response scale, then there's quite a rump of people who are grappling with this, and they're the ones that are already kind of having a go, which is quite interesting. Anyway, the report suggests that, I'm just looking at my notes here, 31% expect substantial transformation in less than a year, 48% expect it in 1 to 3 years. So, I think business leaders they're excited and they really want some results from this technology. So there's basically a big hunger here.
Yeah, they want to believe in it. Basically, they want it to live up to its promises. Yes, that's true.
And what do they want to do? They want to improve efficiency and productivity. They want to reduce costs. They want to improve existing products and services, encourage growth and innovation, and shift workers from lower to higher value tasks. Now, the thing there is improve efficiency and productivity, and that has all sorts of implications, which I think will, if you're in learning and HR, the implication clearly is, well, what does that mean? What is the productivity issue is the one that has never, ever gone away in all the time we've looked at research reports. The UK is terrible in the G7 for its levels of productivity, and all of a sudden you've now got the technology that's going to completely turn that on its head. Well, that's what people hope it's going to do. But, will it? That's the question. But it's quite interesting because that's the big driver, and reduction of costs. Now, that is not going to be a surprise to anybody. What is surprising is that this research looks at the levels of generative AI adoption across functions in these businesses that are beginning to use generative AI. IT and marketing right at the top. And who should be at the bottom, or second from bottom, is HR. And actually at the bottom is legal, risk and compliance, which you would probably expect to be there. But that's interesting. So HR, and I presume that L&D is within that for the purposes of this research, are one of the functions that's slowest to adopt this technology. So, and I think that when we first started this interview, I said there's a red flag, and for me that is the red flag. It's that slowness in really getting our heads round the technology and looking at what that can do. I think, from other research, I can see that L&D is in an experimentation sort of phase. But I think we have to be quite clear about how long is that experimentation phase going to last for. It can't last forever when every other function's done that and is now beginning to make process change. So, that is a red flag.
It is. And while they're at the bottom of the heap, they're not going to be very good at helping the rest of the organization maximize the use or develop the appropriate skills across the organization so that the organization can make the best use of the technologies that are potentially available. So there's a whole world of pain in that. I think it's not just about HR's not using it very well. It's that they are the enabling group who should be pushing it across the whole organization, and they can't possibly do that if they don't know what it is themselves. So there is, I think that kind of puts a damper slightly on the optimism for increased productivity and efficiency and cost cutting, because all of that depends on the, I suppose, mature adoption and careful thought and the use of their workforce to implement, because they can't recruit. You'll never be able to recruit people to do that, or very few people. So there's got to be a kind of well of development and knowledge and expertise and competence emerging from the organization. And it doesn't appear to be there, does it, Martin? I think it's a really wise point that you're making.
And that leads on to the fact that in this research, what's called talent preparedness is kind of lacking. It's a huge challenge. How do you upskill and reskill people in light of the fact that generative AI will be driving efficiency and automation? So that is an issue for lots of respondents in this research, that actually lots of organizations are slow to educate employees around AI and are slow in adopting some of these kind of process efficiencies that would help kind of shift the whole talent management focus onto what employees should be doing in light of using this technology.
Yeah, 22% are highly prepared or very highly prepared in talent, and in technology infrastructure, it's 50%, 40%. So you've got almost a diametrically opposite result there, so that the people who should be creating the energy are very poorly prepared, and the infrastructure is ready to go. And that is a recipe for disaster, because that's when mistakes get made, or bad policy is made, or strategy is inappropriate, etc., etc. Any other points, final points about the report, Martin? It's worth reading, isn't it? It's definitely worth reading.
Yeah, I think, look, it's the red hot topic for every industry sector and every function within every organisation. And I think, as we said at the start of this, I think it's a snapshot of here and now, but I think there is some learning here. And I think, my takeaway is that HR is one of the slowest functions to adopt this technology. And there are quite big talent challenges around the corner. And those two things together aren't a good look in the organisation. So I think that needs to change quite quickly.
Yeah, there's an overwhelming gap. The vast majority of leaders, 72%, said they expect generative AI to drive change in their talent strategies over the next 2 years. But less than half reported they are sufficiently educating their employees on the capabilities, benefits, and value of generative AI. So there's a 50% gap there between what the leaders want and expect to happen and the preparedness of the workforce. So there's work to be done. But I also look on the upside. What opportunities? What opportunities? If you're in L&D, you could be at the heart of transformation, or you could be out of the organization. It's a pretty stark choice as far as I'm concerned.
We've talked about alignment forever, yeah? So for me, the narrative here is business leaders are looking to drive productivity and efficiency and process change and just transform the business. Now, L&D has the opportunity to align with that agenda and really make it happen. So I think that's the opportunity. I don't think this is, I'm raising the red flags that come out of the research. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. No one's saying there isn't. It's just a case, I think at the moment, it looks like learning is slower to get out of the blocks, but that doesn't mean it can't get to where it needs to get to.
Yes. So let's be optimistic. Yeah. That's a good note to end. Martin, as usual, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that contribution. There we are, Kate. That's another week and another show and another month. What struck you today? What did you like? What did you find really intriguing?
Well, I mean, a great rounded view, I think. So, from a skills discussion with Sam Taylor to Gen AI with Egler, and then, looking at some market things. So Rob talked to Miles Runham, you talked to Martin Cousins. So I think just that whole kind of rounded view really stood out for me, and I guess shows what a lot of our viewers will be juggling, right? Is that full spectrum of the here and now and the future focused. So I think hopefully we're covering, the full gamut.
I agree with you. And I was going to say that I think that people are juggling focus on skills, focus on AI, focus on more general trends. So all of that comes up in the show. And the answer, I'm afraid, to everybody is you can't just focus on AI. You can't just focus on skills. You can't just focus on big global trends. All of those things have to be in your domain and on your radar. And we kind of, I think we nailed it in the show in a way, not by what we said, but by the implications of all of the things that everybody has brought to this month. So it was good. I think that's exactly the kind of message that we need to get over to people, that there is a lot on and you need to be over and across all of it, not just part of it.
Yeah. And for those of you out there on this journey, juggling the now and the next, drop us a line. I mean, come and share how you're managing that juggle, because I think that is the push and pull of where a lot of people find themselves in L&D at the moment. So yeah, drop us a line if you'd like to share any future stories.
Yeah. What is going on? What event?
12th and 13th of June is CIPD's Festival of Work. 24th of June is our good friend Fiona McBride is running the HR Leaders Unconference. I'm desperate to go to that. Yeah.
We're rooting for that. We're rooting for that. Yes.
Yeah, just really unstructured, really open discussion, super valuable. Very, very stark contrast to a lot of other events out there. And then 11th to 12th of September, our friends at the LPI are running Learning Live, and then right the way through to the 8th and 9th of October, and World of Learning at the NEC.
And we will see you, talking of merry-go-rounds, we'll be back on the merry-go-round on the 27th of June. Put it in your diary. We'll look forward to welcoming you then. Thanks very much, Kate.
See you then.